Hello everybody, AJ Soccer here with another episode of Modern Maniacs, and we are dredging it up, old school style. This is a deck that is sort of always on the fringes of Modern, especially ever since Golgari Grave-Troll was unbanned. That Dredge 6 is pretty powerful. But we still don't have access to Dread Return, where Dread Return is the card that sort of put Dredge over the top, getting back a Flamekin Zealot, giving all your zombies haste, or getting an Iona or something like that. But we don't have access to that. So there's a bit of a crossroads where you can go this direction, which I'll explain obviously, or you can go the Unburial Rites direction, which is, you know, it's not as fast as Dread Return, but it has similar functionality. You don't have the inherent sacrifice to go into your Flamekin Zealot, so you don't have the zombies. So really, Unburial Rites is usually for Elesh Norn or Iona, rather than the one-turn kill. Those are the builds that you've probably seen if you've seen Dredge in Modern. They often use Life from the Loam because getting 3 white for Unburial Rites is not the easiest if you are using all of your draw steps to dredge. So Life from the Loam is a big part of that deck. It often uses things like Vengeful Pharaoh, which is a pretty cool card. But yeah, a much more controlling deck. This build is a lot more in line with what the Dread Return Dredge deck was doing. And instead of Dread returning a Crater Hoof Behemoth or Flamekin Zealot, it kind of uses Greater Gargadon as both its sacrificed outlet. You know, the sacrifice 3 creatures to Dread Return was almost as valuable as the get back a dude, and then the 9/7 itself is kind of the dude. So why now? Why have I waited until episode, whatever I'm on, 12, 13-ish maybe, to try Dredge? And the answer is this dude. Fabio over here is exactly what this deck needed. A lot of builds would either have the Life from the Loam, where part of your dredge engine is just casting your Life from the Loam, and then you have a dredger in the yard. But the more combo-y builds had to use things like Wild Guess, which RR is not exactly the easiest, or Ideas Unbound, which UU is not necessarily the easiest, and it has the draw then discard, and it doesn't even discard until end step. Whereas these sort of discard first and then draw, super powerful when you don't have things like Putrid Imp, the automatic discard outlets to start dredging immediately, like you do in Legacy, or Vintage for that matter, with Bazaar. Wild Guess is not a very powerful card. Tormenting Voice, the same card, but easier to cast. Insolent Neonate lets you get there a turn earlier. You get to draw one less card, but it's the turn 1 that counts. And I remember discussing this deck with some other brewers, and I was just bemoaning that we just need a 1-mana discard outlet. We need a Tireless Tribe or something. And Hapless Researcher was brought up. Maybe Hapless Researcher will get a reprint or something. And I said, yeah, that would be amazing. This is actually better than Hapless Researcher because you discard first. But also, without the Cabal Therapies and Dread Returns and the automatic sacrifice outlets, having something die is also beneficial because you get a zombie for every Bridge from the Below in your yard. So, this card is exactly what the doctor ordered, and thus, we're revisiting. There are basically 5 sections of cards. You can see it's laid out thusly rather than in curve form. And that's because these are the card drawing outlets. That's the other thing, is to play Wild Guess, you had to play like 2 Wild Guess to get to 10 discard outlets. Here I even had room for a 13th discard outlet in the form of 1 Wild Guess. Then the Dredgers. Obviously Grave-Troll and Stinkweed Imp are both great. The Dakmor Salvage is not good at dredging necessarily, but being able to dredge a land is sometimes quite useful, especially with Bloodghasts, which brings us to this next section, which is the things that come back from the graveyard. So the Narcomoeba, you mill it, and then it comes directly into play. The Bloodghast has Landfall, bring this back, and the Prized Amalgam comes back if it sees either of these come back as well. It follows suit. Then the Bridge from Below, clearly the engine card, and Greater Gargadon, the sacrifice outlet slash last win condition. So pretty self-explanatory. If you haven't seen Dredge in action before and you're having a hard time wrapping your head around this, don't worry. It'll become self-explanatory as we play our first games. Mana base is pretty simple, 10 fetches. All of my lands are red because all of my relevant cards are red, including the Greater Gargadon. I have Stomping Grounds for casting Golgari Grave-Troll does come up, but also the sideboard has a bunch of green cards, which we'll get to. And 2 Blood Crypt because being able to cast Stinkweed Imp actually comes up quite a lot, and you can even use it to cast something like Bloodghast if necessary, along with Dakmor Salvages. The 1 Steam Vents is not necessary, could easily cut it. I think it's pretty free to play since I have all these fetches anyway, and all I really care about is getting red. And being able to cast in Archamoeba if it's in your opener, or a Prized Amalgam if your hand is really glutted, or post board where you're fighting over your graveyard, can be definitely worthwhile. So I think it's worth throwing in 1 Steam Vents and then of course 2 basic Mountain along with the 2 Dakmor Salvages. The sideboard, Gnaw to the Bone, is awesome. This is, in the Life from the Loam version that I mentioned earlier, I think Gnaw to the Bone is essential. It makes the deck work because you take a hit from a creature and your Vengeful Pharaoh kills it, but you still took 5 from that Tarmogoyf, and you are inherently slower than a deck like this, so having this life gain is really, really important. And you put so much of your deck into your graveyard so quickly that it's often just, well, first of all, if you have one in your hand, then you get to cast it twice, or if you dredge one, you get to cast it, not at a loss of a card, and it gains 14, 16, 18 life very, very quickly. Ancient Grudges, obviously a powerful card against Affinity and the like, but also most of the hate, the graveyard hate that is played in Modern, is in artifact form. Pretty easy to play all of these, and again, flashback. Dredging into a flashback card is almost like drawing a card, but better because it's like something that you actively wanted. You're putting these cards in your deck for a reason, so it's kind of like a free Demonic Tutor almost. It feels really good. Conflagrate is the same thing, another awesome flashback card, / discard outlet. This is, of course, for tokens and the like, elves and whatnot. The 1 Lightning Axe, against creature decks, being able to kill a creature and discard a card to get your Dredge engine going is super, super powerful. And Scavenging Ooze is a real thing, so I almost wish that I could play more of these, but there's no room. In fact, I don't even have room for the 4th Leyline of the Void. I think this sideboard is really, really tight. And Leyline of the Void is for other graveyard decks, and it also has the special use of turning off your opponent's ability to stop your bridges. So if your opponent has a non-token creature that dies, your bridge is removed, but Leyline of the Void is a replacement effect, so their creature doesn't die, it just goes straight to exile and your bridges are safe. Should be noted, just like Anafenza, the foremost in Standard against Rally, we saw the tokens still do go to the graveyard for a brief time, so tokens still work against the bridge if Leyline's in play, but non-tokens, Leyline does stop. And then lastly, 1 Burning Inquiry. It is another discard outlet, but it is super, super high velocity. The idea behind the Burning Inquiry is when you need more discard outlets and less sort of grindy stuff, those matchups are usually, combo of sorts. And Burning Inquiry has the added ability of hopefully Hymn to Torroking them, in addition to really getting your engine going. You play a turn 1 Faithless Looting, turn 2 Burning Inquiry, you can flip half your deck pretty quickly, which I also should mention, Faithless Looting, even though you don't discard first, drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards for 1 mana is crazy powerful, and the flashback, again, is just free in this deck. I hope that we can make something happen here. As much as I would love to play the Life from the Loam version, I am more drawn to this version, and I have something even cooler planned for the next video. so that probably won't happen, at least for a while. Let's see how it runs.